early, so we waited in the airport for Jason, and then we got to explore the beautiful city. It was truly amazing. I would highly recommend looking up the Hong Kong Cultural Center in Tsim Sha Tsui, and you can stand on the one side and overlook at the sunset of Hong Kong Island. It was a beautiful, beautiful sunset, and was really, really cool to see the lights of the city over the water. One of my favorite parts was going to Lanao Island and seeing the Big Buddha. We got the trip on TripAdvisor, and it was very reasonable for us to get transportation out there. They gave us opportunities to walk around and have a actually amazing lunch. Usually those lunches aren't so good, but it was very, very good. And the views were spectacular up top. They gave people the option to go back on the bus and drive up to the top, but it really wasn't that many steps, and you could take it at your own pace. So I definitely recommend just walking up the stairs if you're able to, and getting to the top was the most beautiful views of the entire mountain range. I definitely would love to go back and check into seeing if we could hike the mountains as well. One of the coolest parts of the trip was actually going to this little town that was a fishing town, and we got to see how the locals lived, and we got to explore and walk around. It was really, really cool. But then, of course, you knowing us, we were rushing back to the boat to make sure we didn't miss it. And so we had to take some bus back, and there wasn't even any room on the bus, so we had to stand. I don't know if I'd recommend doing that. Going with the tour group might be better. After the bus, we got a taxi, and the guy definitely was trying to rack up the bill. So definitely be careful and be clear on how much it costs before you get in to the ride, because we knew how much it already cost, and that we actually only had a certain amount of money to give him. So we just were at risk for missing the boat. Hanoi was one of my favorite parts as well, because the motorbikes and the traffic and the way that they have to dodge buses on the street because people are just driving in the center, it's kind of like playing a big game of chicken, was super interesting and very different. And then we had these two little kids, one from the Asian group and one from the American group, and they had never really seen someone like the other person, and they were so excited, and I just thought this picture captured the moment perfectly. Halong Bay was very, very beautiful. I definitely recommend going there if you're in Vietnam. We got to see some really cool and interesting caves as well. When you're in Halong Bay, definitely take a small boat ride around the rocks and the formations. It is well worth it. Even though we were on a cruise, we were still very, very happy to spend this time going through the rock formations. It's unlike anything that I've ever seen before. Ho Chi Minh City was not my favorite of the places, but one of our highlights was our little rickshaw ride where my mom gave the guy a $20 tip. In their money, that was 20 times more than the ride even cost, and my dad wasn't very happy about that. But it was really nice to be able to give back to the people because everything is so cheap there, so it's definitely easy to give back. I think by this point we had seen a few too many temples and they were sort of falling apart and not well kept, which gave it a very authentic feel, but it didn't necessarily look super pretty, so it was interesting, but not a must-do. They really made exquisite handmade art made with eggshells and unique designs. They even had Uber motorcycles and tons of motorcycles. I wish we could have tried to ride one. The lady recommended we didn't, so I can't say if they'd be unsafe. It did look a little chaotic, but it did look like a fun idea if you're adventurous. This was definitely one of those moments to remember when your bus breaks down on the highway, in the middle of the highway, and you have to switch buses in order to get back to the ship before it leaves. Luckily, they were able to get us a bus really, really quickly. I would highly recommend the cruise as well. It was one of my favorite cruises because the itinerary included an overnight in Hong Kong, an overnight in Thailand, and an overnight in Singapore. It's not often that you get an overnight, which allows you to really see a lot more and get a really good feel of not only the daytime life, but also what the nightlife is like. Also, this cruise was super warm and had good weather. We did get unfortunate. I think I brought my Puerto Rico bad luck with me, and I got to encounter my second hurricane in just a month or two, And luckily, I didn't have to experience Maria as well. It would have been my third. So that ended up being okay because they just moved the itinerary by one day and everything was still able to go as planned. A tuk-tuk ride in Bangkok is definitely a must. I did one during the day and at night, and I thought that it was well worth it. It also gave us a good break because we walked a lot around the town. I feel like the overall safety in Asia was very, very good, and it wasn't something that I would be worried about. So it's definitely a place you could take your family or your parents. The Grand Palace was also a highlight of our trip. It was one of the most beautiful palaces I have seen, with so many intricate designs and a lot to see. We ended up going a little too late and we didn't have enough time. I think we only had an hour. Also, if you notice our fun pants, they do require you to cover your knees and your shoulders, which is often hard when the weather is really hot, but they will not let you in without that. So you'll end up getting those at a shop right across the street, and they'll sell it to you for a lot more money than if you came prepared with it yourself. One of the main reasons we only had an hour to see the palace and we missed the lying down Buddha, which we really wanted to see, was because the traffic was so bad that it took us about an hour to an hour and a half to go only 3 miles or 5 kilometers. So it definitely was not the best time of day to go. It was around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, but the traffic in Bangkok is always pretty bad, so it's definitely something to consider if you're able to even take a tuk-tuk or to take the tram as well. That worked a lot better. It was really nice to be able to walk around all of the outdoor little market areas with restaurants and durian. So if you haven't had durian, it may smell a little bit like onions and garlic, but if you get a sweet durian and you have a taste for durian, you'll really like it. So I'd highly recommend trying it if you haven't ever tried it before. Another thing that is fun but maybe not good for families, maybe a once in a lifetime type of thing, is to see a ping pong show at night and to walk on the streets. I was there on a Wednesday night at about 2 in the morning and the streets were packed as if you were in the biggest festival on a weekend. So I would definitely recommend trying out those things as well. In Singapore, if you don't have a lot of time, the hop-on, hop-off bus was really good because the city is very large and there's lots of different sections like Chinatown and Little India. So there's lots to see, and I had some of the best Chinese food I've ever had in this little market area in Chinatown in Singapore. And also there was lots of cute little souvenirs that you could gather here, and lots of cool, interesting buildings that you might not see anywhere else. The Singapore Night Safari Zoo is also super interesting. It is a bit of a bus ride out to the actual zoo, but they have it set up with the train system so that you can get it at the main train area, and it's pretty easy to maneuver. One of the coolest things about the night safari was all the animals are very active at night, as well as you get up close and personal. I was just a few feet away from this bat. It definitely was an interesting experience. Even after doing a real safari in Africa, you get to see a lot more very quickly. So it's super entertaining the entire time, and you feel less like you're in a zoo and more like you're actually out in the wilderness, which was really cool because I don't know if I've ever hiked in the rainforest at night, and I don't know if I ever will again. So it's definitely a unique experience. Seeing Singapore all lit up at night with all the Christmas spirit was definitely something that you should do, because they definitely have a lot more lights and Christmas cheer than I think we do in the US. Some of us were definitely tired by the end of the trip, but I was able to manage to go out dancing in this little area by the water, which had lots of dance clubs, and it was very, very fun on a Saturday night. Overall, we had a great trip in Hong Kong, Vietnam, Thailand, and Singapore. I'll definitely have to go back and see more of Thailand and some of the little islands. And I think the Philippines are on the list as well. But if you get to do this cruise, we did Celebrity X, and you could have the same similar itinerary with 3 overnights. You'll get to really experience Southeast Asia at its finest.